welcome to Queer Spirit Rising, the gay man's guide to sacred aging, where we're going to explore the sacred journey of healing and wisdom and pride for gay and queer men, just like you and me, and those of us who are embracing elderhood, just like you and me. So my name is Anthony Rios, and we're going to walk this chapter about becoming more whole, more vibrant, and more free. Now, this is episode 3 of this podcast, and this episode is called The Wounded Elder, about healing old scars and embracing new wisdom. Now, in the previous episode, I called it more about the wounded healer, as that is something that I deal with as a traditional healer. But in this episode, I really want to talk about the wounded elder, gay and queer men walking around as the wounded elder, and how we heal those old scars and embrace new wisdom on our journey. Okay, so we talked about understanding what it means to be a wounded elder, about being rejected when we were young, problems we had in high school or in college, but these emotional and spiritual wounds that we carry, especially for gay and queer men over the age of 50, all in our commitment that we had to ourselves to survive, to adapt. And many people living in silence, many people being very outspoken, as I was, but we're walking around with these emotional wounds and spiritual wounds of rejection and abandonment early in life. Now, when I say abandonment, there's abandonment from your blood family that happened to a lot of people, but there's also abandonment from your circle of friends, especially if you were like me, 19, 20 years old coming out. A lot of friends, we just stopped hanging around because they didn't want to be around me. I didn't want to be around them. And that's just how it happened, right? We're living through decades and decades of surviving, adapting, managing how we go about our daily life as gay and queer men. Now, I came out in 1980, so things were really, really different back then. And one of the big differences was, and I say this a lot in my work, is that I was raised by queens. And I love those queens to death. I have wonderful memories, a lot of those queens, and many of those queens are no longer with us. Many of them were taken during the AIDS epidemic. Many died of natural causes. The thing is, I was raised by queens, and I love saying that because I'm a queen from the old school, and there's a lot to be said for that knowledge, that experience, that wisdom of being raised in a group of people who had to stick together to survive. So that's one form of abandonment, is abandonment from your circle of friends and family that you were so used to, but it was better than hiding your true self, right? So I want to talk a little bit about some things that I think are important along the path of healing for gay and queer men over the age of 50, because my whole mission is about spiritual healing, to heal those spiritual wounds that we're carrying around and reconnecting you with the divine, with your divine essence, with source, with creator, whatever you want to call it. And I'll share with you about my experience with the Catholic Church and when I left the Catholic Church when I was 29 years old. But first, let me just say that this whole thing about living through decades of being told how to live, how not to live, you're too gay, don't show off, don't. My mother used to say that, why do you have to like flaunt it? And that used to drive me crazy. But we had to adapt. And then we had to deal with AIDS in the 1980s and 1990s. There's a whole other series of podcasts and shows I could do about that. But about losing friends, lovers, just whole communities during the AIDS crisis. And we've never really had the opportunity as gay and queer people to grieve that in a communal, tribal way. And I think that's caused a lot of hurt and pain for us over these decades, because there's something to be said for tribalism and rituals and ceremonies that keep a community strong, right? And we never got to do that. The closest thing that we got was maybe the Names Project, and that was a huge, huge monument to grief, or it is a huge monument to grief, and it did bring people together as a way to grieve in a community fashion, in a ritual, in a ceremony, even when it was displayed. But I think all spread out all over the country, wherever you live, that we stopped talking about it, and we never really grieved in a way that would give us a different kind of strength to move forward. We had to keep going forward, right? We just stopped living. We had to keep going, and we don't talk about it much anymore, right? So I could do a whole weekend workshop just allowing us to grieve about that. And also there's the whole thing about survivor guilt, feeling like, why am I here? They're not, being left behind. That whole kind of thing, like, oh my God, now what? So many people are carrying that guilt still, and you deal with it in different ways, right? I dealt with it by drugs and alcohol and lots of anonymous sex. Kind of like the same thing I did when I first came out. And then there was a period, kind of like that cycle repeated itself, because I was experiencing trauma from losing so many people over a short period of time, the medical trauma of the medical establishment not knowing what to do, the society trauma of society wanting to put us in quarantine camps and get rid of us altogether, and then just being invisible during the height of the epidemic by having to take care of people, and just you just didn't have time to do the grieving, to do the introspection, because there were people that needed help, right? And I think many of us, including myself, never had that pain, that trauma fully acknowledged, and it gets suppressed. And that causes a wound. That causes trauma, societal trauma, emotional trauma, spiritual trauma. And we carry those wounds. We've been carrying those wounds for a long time. So when I say the wounded elder, that is one of the things that I'm talking about. So then we come to this piece about, well, why do these wounds matter? Why do these spiritual wounds matter for me as an elder, right? I'm an elder in the community. Well, these wounds are really shaping how we experience ourselves as we age, how we experience our spirituality, and even our intimacy without us even realizing it. So look, the big one that they impact is self-worth. The big one is self-worth. You may feel that it's too late, that too much time has gone by, can't be in another relationship, or you don't know how to be in a relationship. You're just at an age now where your body doesn't want to work the way it used to work, so you may just withdraw. That's a wound. That's trauma. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can be healed. And I come to it from a spiritual perspective of bringing your reconnection with divinity, with the divine in you, so that you don't have to feel like it's too late in life, that you're too broken or you're invisible, right? Because that's like a big macro part of aging. The invisibility, it's too late, your body's not holding up, your mind's not holding up. That's the macro. On the community level, on the personal level, there are ways that we can work together to heal the emotional and spiritual wounds so that we can move on in this stage of life vibrant, alive, whole, and complete, but with some more energy, with a bigger vitality that's missing for a lot of people in our age group, over 50, over 60. Now, one of the things I've seen that happens is a lot of people, well, over the age of 50, and especially when you get past 60, depending on who you are, you want to downplay your sexual desires, or you think it's too late, you can't do this, you can't try that. Let me tell you something. I'm experimenting with things now that I've always wanted to experiment with in a healthy way, in a safe, sane, sober way. But it's really amazing, and I think I'm gonna have to make a note and do a whole podcast about that, because a lot of the men in my peers seem to, they'll talk a lot of trash, but they're not like going to go put themselves out there and enjoy it. Enjoy the physical experience of intimacy, of sexual intimacy, right? That's a very important piece for us as gay men, as queer men, and we can't let that just go by the wayside. I'm saying I don't think you should, right? This might be the only time I say you really should have a lot of sex. And I really think that's important, because if you downplay or try to avoid those desires, you're denying spirit. You're denying spirit. Because look, that's part of the gift that spirit has given to us, is this ability to express ourselves in this intimate sexual way that is super important. And it's part of spiritual exploration. And it's part of believing that you are worthy. And it's part of the foundation of self-love that I talk about all the time. Foundation of self-love. So we're going to come back to that in some other episodes, but I want you to not think that you have to wind down, right? That you have to wind down at this point in your life, because there's a lot of living to do. And so many people, as we age and we see this, embracing elderhood as a winding down and slowing down, rather than stepping into your new power as an elder in the community. I'm stepping into new power, embracing elderhood by, just as much as I can, because it creates deeper connection and a deeper sense of purpose and deeper sense of belonging, because you do belong, because you are worth it. And we need you. We need your experience, your wisdom, so that you don't end up isolated and afraid to be vulnerable and unseen. And that is, I think, the sad part that happens to so many people over the age of 50 and 60, gay men, queer men, is that you want to withdraw. And you sometimes have to create your own safe spaces. I know I've had to do that. You're going to have to create your own spaces, your own spiritual circles. If you want to date some more, sure, there may be rejection, just like it was when you were 20 or 25. But don't deny yourself. I guess let me just say that. I think that's a big part of it. Don't deny yourself at this point in life. Don't just retire and go sit in a bar, right? And fool the young guys, right? It could be fun. I'm not saying, that's not fun, but there's so much more to do. There's so much more to do. You have a lot of experience and wisdom to share with the younger queens out there, right? The younger boys and girls out there. So let me see what else I wanted to say here. Part of the work of healing, of spiritual healing, is your relationship with spirit, whether you say spirit or God, the creator. But part of it is healing that relationship with the divine, being reconnected with your divine essence in a way that is beautiful and nurturing. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. And let me tell you, it's really, really simple, because if you have a fractured or complicated relationship with spirituality because of the way you were raised, and spirituality, religion was used as a weapon against us, right? I know it was for me. That was my experience. And for many of us raised in Judeo-Christian religions, it was used as a weapon against you, right? You're a sinner. You're going to burn in hell. That's a sin. You can't do that. But you're bringing shame on the family. You're bringing shame to God and all this stuff. That's a bunch of bullshit. Now, I know many of you already know that, but the disconnect was so strong and the trauma was so strong and the hurt it was for me that I kind of walked away for a minute. But I knew there was a spiritual void that needed to be filled, and I didn't know how to fill it. And that's another story I'll share with you down the road. But if you hunger for this spiritual connection, but you feel unsure about how to approach it and how to reconnect because of whatever the dogma was or whatever shame you might be carrying or anything like that, there's a way to heal that. And what I call it is reconnecting with your sacred self, how to heal the sacred self that's in you. The divine is already in you. You are divine. You are a sacred creation, right? Holiness isn't reserved for saints and special people. There's a place for you in this sacred path. There's a place for you and your sacred story to tell that celebrates all of you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it all comes from the same place. It all comes from the divine and the light, and that is who you are. So I want you to understand that, yes, it can be healed. Yes, it can be healed, and it just takes some practice and a willingness to heal it. So, you work on the inner healing, the spiritual healing, and you get to a point, okay, now what do I do? Where do I go from here? Now that I've named that wound, whether it was shame or whether it was rejection, whether it was invisibility, whatever it was for you, now what do we do with it? How do we go to the next place? Well, part of it is very, very simple. It's really about on remembering who you are as a divine spiritual being, as a created in the image of God, of the divine, of the creator. But remembering that, and when you reconnect really deeply, and you've worked through the shame, through the guilt, through the anger. I had a lot of anger and bitterness about it, right? When you work through those things, then you can work on the next step, which is really all about self-love. Self-love, sharing yourself, dealing with yourself with compassion, with kindness, and then look to see what's my next role now at this age as an elder in the community. And I really want you to take a look at embracing elderhood. What does that mean for you as a gay queer man over the age of 50, over the age of 60, and what the joy that you could bring to your own life and the lives of others by healing all of those wounds and reconnecting with your divine essence, and then being able to walk in with a new sense of freedom, a new sense of liberation, that you don't have to hold anything back anymore. You really don't. You don't have to hold anything back anymore that you may have been holding back in the past. And you allow yourself the freedom, the liberation to be completely yourself, however it is that you want to be now, free of those shackles of the shame, the guilt, the bitterness, the anger, the rejection, all of those things, right? That will definitely, definitely set you free. The whole thing about being a healed elder is that, one, it's going to happen in stages, yes, but you don't have to hide. You don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to hide the scars. You don't have to hide the hurt. You've dealt with it. You've dealt with it, and you can talk about it freely, right? We get to a certain age where it's like, you know what? I made it this far, and I got a lot of life left, and I need to have a call on a deeper and a stronger sense of who I am to move forward. And that's all about having that connection with your sacred self, with the divine essence that is you, that's always been there. You just forgot about it, and it's time to bring that back together. So you just want to ask yourself, what would it look like if I was completely healed? Who would I be if I was able to heal that shame, the guilt, the anger, the bitterness, all of that? Who would I be now as an elder in the community, fully healed? How would I show up? How would I look at myself? How would I honor myself? How would I love myself on a whole different level now that that I've gone to this new level of healing. I think it's really, really important to take a look at that and see how you would start answering those questions for yourself. I'm going to leave it there for now. I wanted to just really kind of dive a little bit deeper into this, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot more because it's really, really important to look at these wounds and heal them, do the work of inner healing, spiritual healing. I use shamanic tools, I use meditation, I use journey work, I use somatic body work, that kind of thing, and it's really, really amazing. So I'm going to leave it there for now. If you like what you've heard, please share the podcast with your friends. Share it and be part of the conversation. Leave your comments. And that's it for now. So my name is Anthony Rios. You're listening to Queer Spirit Rising, a gay man's guide to sacred aging. Thank you very much. And we'll talk again real soon. Bye now. Looking for some hot stuff.